Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, Mr. Samresh Kumar. Samresh, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Ashutosh. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Samresh is the founder, chairman, and CEO of SkyX Solar. He was the Entrepreneur of the Year in 2021, and he's being named among the top 10 power business leaders. So, Samresh, before we get into SkyX, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief. Thank you, Ashutosh, for having me. So I hail from India, from Jamshedpur. By education, I'm an engineer from IIT Delhi and MBA from IIM Cal. Over the last 22 odd years of my career, I've done multiple stuff. I've done investment banking, done consulting. Started my career as a consultant in India, Middle East, with Anderson Consulting, stroke Accenture. Then did private equity, stroke strategic investments, building businesses, especially in the energy space, oil and gas in India, Russia, UK, Africa, with a group called Sun Group, which are owned by the Khemkas.
I know Shiv well.
Yes, with Shiv. And then I had started my investment bank in India.
Okay.
And later that year, the world's largest investment bank collapsed. So it was very interesting. And then destiny brought me to Vietnam in early 2010. And it's been, almost 12 years here, largely investing and building businesses.
Wow. So let's talk about SkyX Solar. You did mention you were interested in energy when you were in India. But tell me a little bit more about the venture and what was your motivation to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure. So when I did energy investments with Sun Group, it was primarily in the oil and gas side, right? Did not do a lot in the renewable side, and renewables was not, so hot that time. It was, supported by subsidies. In the last 5 years, 5 years back, when I joined Vina Capital, which is the most experienced investment management group out of Vietnam. I was leading the private equity investments from the balance sheet and looking at new platforms for Vina Capital principal investments to set up. And that's when I, realized that the renewable energy space would take off, especially the solar, given the industry shifts which were happening, right? And within the renewable and solar space, I love the rooftop solar space because it's not just it's a license play, but it's where a lot of commercial deals have to be done, right? So I presented to the board and said, we should start our own rooftop solar company because the sector is at its infancy. And thankfully they agreed. And, we started it. I became the chairman CEO accidentally because I wanted to find a CEO to lead this while we drive it from the board and as an investor, but couldn't find the right person. And then I said, I believe in it. I'll build it out, right? So I've become an accidental entrepreneur in the rooftop solar space, so to speak.
Amazing. And as they say, the rest is history. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's talk about energy, Samresh. Tell me, what are some of the energy shortfalls that you are addressing when you are talking about solar, and how large is this gap?
Yeah, I think the gap is huge. Let me talk about Vietnam in specifically, but wherever there is high growth in the world, right? The situation is is very similar, right? Because when the country is going through high growth, you need a large amounts of power, and where would the new power come from? There is no support for coal. I think no new coal power plants would come up across the world generally. So it is renewable, right? In Vietnam, the power demand supply gap is around 8 to 10%, right? So that gap has to be filled by either gas, and gas fired power could come from LNG sources, which are very expensive and it takes time to build, or renewable. Hydro, there's not much potential. Coal, no new large power plants would get built. So solar and wind becomes a very, very effective source to supply this power.
And I'm told that there is a huge revival happening of nuclear all over the world.
Yeah, there are discussions. There are discussions regarding that, but there are challenges. I have not heard that any new nuclear power plant is getting built, but discussions have started.
Okay.
If you ask me, Ashutosh, I think the risks are far, far, far much higher, and the cost of renewable energy sources of power is going much lower, right? So if we can solve the transmission issue and regulatory issue, I think more and more renewable energy adoption will happen. Yes.
And when you talk about renewable, and you also said because of wind, which is solar and say wind, what do you think will happen to thermal and hydel in the short term?
Yeah, thermal. So basically coal and gas, right? Coal dead. I don't think there's any support, and should not be as well. I think gas, yes. It depends on how much supply of natural gas is there. The second is LNG. Now, LNG based power plants, yes, a lot of it is under development. So in Vietnam as well, few power plants have got approvals, but it will take 5, 7, 10 years to get built, right? So one cannot just rely on those. Hydel, it depends on how much hydel power capacity is available to be harnessed in most of the countries. Actually, most of it has absolutely been harnessed in Vietnam as well, right? So the potential for additional capacity expansion is not so much.
And when you talk about coal, I'm told that a very significant chunk of power in almost all countries in Asia is still coal.
Yes.
Do you see this changing, or will our reliance continue for quite some time?
It is definitely changing, and it is changing very, very fast, right? What has happened in solar is it has really accelerated in development only in the last 3 years, because the solar panel prices went down by around 80%, right? So it made sense to build more solar power plants, and that's when you're seeing so much adoption in China, India, Vietnam, and so on. You don't need government subsidies. So previously, coal-fired thermal power plants were built, right? But no new power plants are getting built. So in Vietnam, just to give you an example, coal supplies around, I think, 35% of the power supply. By 2030, it should go down to probably 20%, and by 2050, probably very less. So when the coal-fired power plant reaches its tenure, I don't think they will get extended, right?
Amazing. And there is also a lot of talk, Samresh, about the cost of energy.
Yeah.
People are now saying that we are reaching a stage where the cost of energy will be almost zero. What are your perspectives? Do you think that will happen in our lifetimes?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. It requires a little deeper analysis, but I'll try to make it short. So solar power cost is going down, right? So right now it is anywhere from around 4 to 5 cents. By 2030, it should go down to around 2 to 3 cents, right? What happens is a solar power plant has warranties for 25 years, right? After which, you've paid, basically you've got your money, investment capital back. So it's largely, very, very low cost of operations, right? So, people are saying that, okay, after 2050, for example, when the world has built a lot of solar power plants and, the capital invested has been returned back, then the marginal cost of operating those solar power plants would be very low, and wind power plant would be very low. So it will not be zero, but it would be less. But I think that's a over optimism as well, because it all also depends on you've got to have storage capacity for the solar, and you have effective transmission capability as well. So it would be low after 2050. I don't think it would be zero.
You don't think everyone's going to get free?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I understand. But you just spoke about storage, and I think that is another very critical factor for solar power.
Yes.
How is this being tackled in the markets that you are in?
Yeah.
And a following question with that is that even though there are this incredible amount of batteries available to store it,
yeah,
the battery waste itself will become a big hazard at some stage. I'd love to get your perspective on both.
Yes, no, very interesting question, Ashutosh. I think what has happened to the solar sector in the last 3 years will happen to the battery and storage sector after 1.5 years. And the reason why I say is twofold, right? One is right now the battery prices are such that having this storage is commercially attractive only in certain specific cases or certain specific countries where the electricity price is still high, right? Vietnam, for example, it's not commercially attractive to use battery for industrial sector at the moment, because the electricity prices doesn't support that. Plus, there is no clear regulation regarding that. So once those two things happen, then the adoption of these batteries would increase, because what is happening is the cost of battery manufacturing is going down. So once it goes down by additional 30%, the adoption would just explode. So everywhere where there would be wind or solar, there would be battery as well, right? So we will see immense growth in the next 10 years, but after a couple of years when the prices go down. Regarding wastage and disposal of those, yes, to be and the same question is asked regarding solar panels as well, as to what do you do with the panels with the power plant
Correct.
Finishes its tenure. I think there's a lot of research being done to do the waste management for the panels and for the batteries as well, and taking out the different constituents and then disposing it or reusing it effectively. I don't think it would be a challenge. We still have time to get to that solution. It's not that difficult. It's just one needs scale. One needs scale. So if if there's X amount of you need to recycle, it's very expensive. But if you have a large scale and the technology gets developed, then the cost of recycling is cheaper. So I don't think that would be a big challenge.
Very interesting. So now let's move to another discussion, which is investments. And you said, that you are a part of Vina Capital. I'm assuming you also make investments on your own.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about Vina Capital, because you said it is one of the most powerful companies in Vietnam from an investment perspective.
One of the most experienced investment management groups. It manages around $4 billion of capital. Wow. It has one private equity fund. It has a few mutual funds. It has a real estate fund. And it has a venture capital fund as well, right? So as I said, I was with Vina leading private equity investments for the balance sheet, and then last couple of 3 odd years, I've been building out SkyX Solar, right? Apart from that, I do investments myself as well.
Okay, and what do you look for before you decide to make an investment?
Yeah, if it's early to mid-stage investment, right? I think there are three things which I look at. One is the foremost is the team, right? So the founding team and the senior leadership team, and how strong are they? What complementary skill sets do they have? Second is the market size, the total addressable market, and the business model, right? So, what is the product? Is there a product market fit, and so on? And the third is the traction, right? So, how have they been performing in the number of years they've been operating? So, these are the three important factors I look at.
Fascinating. And a question that is often asked from a lot of investors, and I'm going to ask you, is that what, in your opinion, are some of the key challenges a lot of startup entrepreneurs face?
I think there are a lot. One is, of hiring the right set of people, right? As a startup goes through a hyper growth, in the first few years, right? And during that stage, early on, you would find or hire certain people who would be suitable for those positions. And then when you grow 10 times or 20 times, you have to reassess whether sometimes those people are not able to step up to when the company grows, or even if they do, there are other areas in the company where opportunities open up, and then you've got to find the right fit, and so on. So getting the right team at the right time is a key challenge. Second, I think, is capital, right? Having the right amount of capital at the right time, right? Because a high growth startup requires capital, and as a lot of founders find out, apart from running their business, a lot of the time is spent in capital raising, right? So people, you see successful founders, they're very good in capital raising, a lot of them. So you have to really learn, and then raise capital at the right time. And of course, you have to continue focusing on the customers. So that's what runs the business. So you have to continuously see whether the product or the service you're offering is giving an exceptional value add to your customer or not, and if their needs changes, you have to pivot and so on. So you have to be very, very customer focused, right? And then all your operations and the structure has to be driven towards that.
Very interesting. And another question is that, as an investor or an angel investor, how involved do you get in the governance of the company?
So, as an angel, I do selectively. Given the investment size is very small, typically, and it's spread out, generally don't get involved on the governance side. It's advice as and when required, and generally helping sometimes in business development, partnerships, strategic partnerships, or help in sometimes in capital raising, right? In slightly mid-stage companies where I've invested through Vina, and then I sit on the board. As a board director, yes, there's more value add in the governance. So as I help in strategy, I help in business development, strategic partnerships. I help in the organization structure to see what the strengths of different people are at C minus level, and where the gaps are. So if the company needs to reach a certain stage in the next 2 years, then where are the gaps which we need to fill in, right? Fourth is help in capital raising. That's one of my forte. And fifth is to look at which metrics, business metrics, which the company and senior management team should focus on as they expand their business. So companies, mid-stage companies where I sit on the board, I mean, these are the 5 areas where I help in.
Very interesting. So, time for two more questions. One more question relating to investments. At what stage do you look for an exit?
Yeah, typically I look for an exit before the company reaches its potential, right? So so generally, the company is in a high growth phase, is going well, and then it reaches its peak, and then it would either stall or sometimes maybe just reduce as well, right? Go down. I like to sell before it reaches its peak, right? So when the times are still good. Because when you reach the peak, everybody wants, a lot of the investors want to sell, right? So
Right.
you don't want to wait till that point of time. So you need to sell before that happens.
Very interesting. And my last question, Samresh, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey and all the great work you are doing in Vietnam, what would you say are three lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away?
Yeah, maybe I'll keep this slightly on the behavior side, because I've done so many things, different things across the world. I've gone through ups and a lot of downs, actually. So there are three things now which as a behavior I try to follow every day. And when I see a lot of people are very, very stressed in life, right? Because of personal, professional,
Correct.
COVID, and so on. And personally, for me, these three things help me keep calm, right? And positive on a daily basis. One is focus on the now. The past is gone. The future, we don't know. Nobody knows what will happen.
Correct.
The only thing we control is now, or we have been now, right? So on my shirt as well, I inscribe now on my sleeves, right? So to remind me every time that now is what we have.
Correct.
Second, Ashutosh, I think is to not worry about things which we cannot control, and just focus on things which we can control.
Yeah.
And have the wisdom to know which things you can control and which you cannot control.
Yeah.
Right. That makes life very, very simple.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of the things in life we cannot control. So why worry about it? Right.
Correct.
It makes it simple. And the third is gratitude. Right. While everybody, all of us are ambitious, we're wanting something, but every day there are so many things we can be thankful about. So practicing daily gratitude, in my mind, is the short way of continual happiness.
Oh, wonderful.
So these are the three things, which I think I follow, and I would love, to share that.
Wonderful. And on that note, and your three amazing, I wouldn't say lessons, but you said behaviors. Number one is focus on the now, which is so important. And I think that has come through to all of us after COVID even more. You never know what's going to happen. Second is don't worry about what you can't control. And the third one, which is so powerful, which is gratitude. Thank you, Samresh, for talking to me about your own journey, about how you have built such an amazing business in the energy sector in Vietnam. Thank you also for talking to me about investing and some of your philosophies of investing. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.